there was also a sense of morality which doesn't exist in Britain anymore. There was a sense of behaving in a way so as to bear other people in mind. I noticed that Islam also offered a space for people to live connected to the unseen while still in the world. It allowed for detachment, whereas in secular society there's so much pressure to be engaged in the material world. Here was a society where people pray on the streets or anywhere in public when it's time to pray, and that's normal. In Britain, there's still a big problem with religion being public. People have developed a problematic relationship with God and have drifted from their fitrah. In the City of the Dead in Cairo, I met people who spent the night absorbed in the remembrance of Allah, their souls flying in the open spaces which opened up before them. I realized what true freedom was. And this was a freedom which did not involve self-destruction. I had found a way of being that was in accord with my own experience of existence, and a body of wisdom that acknowledges the reality of that existence. Just the word inshallah says so much and acknowledges the fact that we don't know what's going to happen even in the next moment in this life. When I came back to Britain, 6 months after first going to Egypt, I was not the same person. I was completely obsessed with Islam, and I was driven to find out more about it. So there began a 2-year investigation during which I thought about converting, and there were times when it was so intense, this weighing up the two ways of life. I had a pain in my chest for about 2 weeks, and I had to tell myself, stop thinking about it. Just live your life, stop thinking about it. But it was no. It's just, there was another power definitely behind it. Otherwise, why, it wasn't going to be particularly convenient for me. But it was just something that I couldn't fight. My Moroccan friend thought that I wouldn't be able to practice Islam, but the more she saw that I was serious, the less happy she was, and eventually she cut all contact from me. I finally took my Shahadatain in 1999 at Regent's Park Mosque. And then it was another couple of years before I wore hijab, and just before that time, again I had a dream of the Prophet ﷺ. I know it was him. People say, how do you know it was him? Because I couldn't see his face. But that was in a dark space where there were some kind of items, and there was a musalla, red and white one, wrapped up, rolled up, standing. And Prophet ﷺ came into the space from my right, wearing, I could just see white and a corner of his beard. And he took a step towards the musalla, and it just unrolled and lay flat in front of him. So I asked a friend, what might this mean? And she asked her father, and the answer was, it's asking for complete submission. He's telling you that you need to submit completely. So that again was a sign that I need to start, wearing hijab and not holding back anymore from anything in Islam. So coming to the path of AhlulBayt ﷺ is another story. I knew nothing about the Shia path apart from that it just wasn't the Sunni path. And I preferred to ignore it because I found it too difficult to understand. I'd also heard the usual stories about how it was started by a converted Jew called Abdullah ibn Sabah. But I was not a particularly ardent Sunni. I was still in the process of learning and finding people with knowledge. When I began to work at Islamic College in 2001, I was asked to proofread texts for publication, and one of those texts was Jihad al-Nafs by al-Hurr, which is, for anyone who hasn't read it, it's a compilation of the teachings of the A'imma, the AhlulBayt. On reading these teachings, I couldn't understand why Sunnis had such a problem with Shias. Here are valuable teachings full of wisdom. As I began to learn about who the Imams ﷺ were, I began to ask myself, Why in the Sunni schools do we know nothing about them? And why do we know nothing about their teachings and their du'as? In 2003, I went on Hajj, and a Shia friend of mine advised me to take the du'as of Imam Hussein and Imam Zain al-Abidin, alayhim salam, to read on the day of Arafat. And again I thought, why don't Sunnis know about these du'as? When I got back from Hajj, I decided to read Nahj al-Balagha, which a colleague had given me. And here again, I was astonished at the power of Imam Ali alayhi salam's personality. This was not the Imam Ali, the shadowy figure that I had learned in the Sunni tradition. I was struck by his clarity and his anger and his directness. And after that, I had a dream in which a devout Sunni man, who I know is a physics teacher at ICAS, but he loves the AhlulBayt, and he appeared to me standing in a white space, and he said, through his mouth came the words, "We will show you the Shia path on condition that you use it for the purposes of peace." And so that condition has always remained in my mind, that it's not something to be used for polemics. This knowledge is not something to be used in arguments against people. As we know, there's a deeper aspect to our existence, a deeper reality which we seldom have the opportunity to explore or to live by. Islam acknowledges that deeper reality, and its way of life is founded upon that reality. The external is in harmony with the internal. It's about having a living relationship with the reality that we witnessed when we were in the realm of the unseen before coming here. And as long as we're connected with that reality, our hearts can find a road to peace. I have to say that when I came to Islam, the anger that I'd been carrying around for many years evaporated. And there's an ayah in the Quran as well where Allah says, "We will remove the anger from your hearts." So much of the anger and frustration that we see people experience today comes from this lack of knowledge of how to connect to that reality. And this is a catastrophe for the soul. Islam is a method of ascending to the divine. Without that method and practice, spirituality just remains an idea. Without legitimate teachings transmitted by the real masters, people are left to turn to imposters and fakes, so-called masters who have nothing to teach. And we can see this in the western part of the world, where people are kind of making a hodgepodge and a mishmash of different kind of beliefs from different traditions and making things up, and you know, they haven't really found a clear path. When you can experience Islam in a country where it's being practiced, it's possible to feel that it is so much more than Sharia, and much more than its social and political aspects. In places where the adhan is called and where people who are devoted live, around Sayyidina Hussein Masjid in Cairo, around the shrines of the AhlulBayt in Syria and Iran, one actually feels the presence of the divine. There is an aliveness in the air. It calls us to a different way of being, a way of being where we are true, who we truly are. By contrast, in countries where there is no adhan and no habitual remembrance of Allah, the atmosphere is dead, even if it might be busy, like in a city such as London. You can see the low and depleted state of the people who live here. There is a darkness and an emptiness which I fight against by doing salawat, especially on public transport. Even the Muslims here are affected by this way of life. Although, when I began to discover Islam, I found that the mosques at least provided some kind of tranquil refuge from the mentality here.